The room was very quiet. She didn't know why, but she suddenly recalled the first time she had been pregnant and the way that had turned out. She had struggled for so long, ranging between hope and despair to have a baby, but she was finally there. She reached out and touched her stomach. Almost as if the baby had sensed something, a leg kicked, and a small bump appeared on her swollen abdomen. She smiled and gently touched the bump. The foot immediately disappeared and kicked in another direction. Brock continued to feed Hannah ice chips while he watched her interact with her baby. He felt a warm feeling come over him. Nancy rose early that morning and was the first to see the group chat. She was shocked. She had only found out about Hannah's endometriosis after Hannah had gotten pregnant. Helga had told her how much the Jung family infertility treatment had helped her. Her heart leaped as she read the message. She hadn't had the same struggles as Hannah, but as a mother, she understood how the whole process felt. She could only imagine how Hannah had endured these years when she had seen everyone else getting pregnant and having children. Nancy replied instantly, "I'm on my way." It wasn't long before all the others saw the message, and with the exception of those away on business, they all made their way to the hospital. As they were arriving, Hannah was in the final stages of delivery. An hour later, they all heard the sound of a crying baby. After Hannah and the baby had been given the all-clear, everyone was allowed in to meet the new arrival. Brock struggled to keep hold of his emotions as he took in the scene, and he looked on with damp eyes. None of them knew the full extent of their struggles to conceive, and it looked likely at one point that Hannah would never be able to carry a child. He knew that she had wanted to leave at one point after seeing a page of her diary and that she had even gone as far as applying for a visa. During that period of time, she hadn't outwardly shown how things were affecting her, and he hadn't asked. He worked hard to clear his calendar and had taken her on a vacation to relax instead. Fortunately, they had been blessed. 4 years later, she had become pregnant, and their baby had just been born. He saw that Hannah was exhausted and thought she had had enough. "I think we need to give baby Wanda back to her mom." Although all their friends handled her expertly, he knew there was nothing like a mother's touch. Brock took Wanda and handed her back to Hannah as talk turned to who she looked like. "Wanda's face shape is like yours, and her nose and mouth look like Hannah's," Ashley said. "But we won't know whose eyes she's inherited until she opens them." "She'll be beautiful no matter what," Nancy commented. "It's not one bad gene pool she's inheriting from." She blinked as she had a thought. "I can't wait until she's old enough for my sons to see her." Ashley understood exactly what Nancy was planning, and she smiled. "Be careful that Esther and Xavier's bride don't snatch her out from under you." "No, their beau has gotten to know a cute girl in kindergarten. They're very close. As for Luke, he's quiet, just like his dad, and I don't believe that he'd be heard with my family in the picture." "You're marrying them off already?" Ashley smiled in satisfaction because it felt good to be out of the house and with friends. She had been feeling quite housebound with her own son. Esther was feeling ill with her pregnancy, so she hadn't been able to make it. Nancy took a picture of Wanda and sent it to her so that she could join in the fun. "My son's future wife." Esther rubbed her stomach as she read it. "As long as your Rebecca doesn't snatch my son-in-law away, that's good." She then sighed as she thought of Xavier and his refusal to drink the medicinal water that Helga had made for him. Then she thought of something and picked up her phone. She changed Xavier's name in her contact list from husband to Sourpuss Sloan. When Wanda was a month old, Brock organized for Hannah's parents to babysit so that he could take Hannah out on a date. While she had been pregnant, she hadn't exercised at all, apart from the occasional slow stroll through the neighborhood. She had spent most of her time at home resting. After a month of giving birth, she was still feeling a little weak. The two of them rode in an unmanned car to the plaza. It was a cool night for the time of year, but there were many young couples milling around. Brock found them somewhere to sit and went to get her a drink. As it was midweek, the queues weren't so bad, so it didn't take long. He detoured to another shop in the square that hired out costumes and chose a dinosaur with a tail. It was uncomfortable to wear and move around him, and he took a few practice steps before heading back in Hannah's direction. Hannah had received a work-related call and was just winding the conversation up. As she was putting her phone away, she saw a green dinosaur walking toward her. Its movements were a little clumsy. The tail was big and shaking behind the creature, and it looked as though it was ready to throw the person inside off balance at any moment. As the dinosaur got closer, she started to suspect something was afoot. She remembered a time several years before that Brock had worn a bear costume to win her over. It had been the moment she had decided to give him a go. When the dinosaur arrived in front of her, it handed her a leaflet. She looked down and realized that it was for a local gym. She blinked uncertainly. The dinosaur outfit didn't reveal anything about the person inside, and it also largely covered the eyes. Coupled with the poor lighting at night, she couldn't make out an eye color. She smiled at the dinosaur. "I haven't been working out recently." The dinosaur seemed to want her to take it and make a show of flexing its own muscles. They bulged nicely in the costume. Hannah was amused. "I don't need to build my muscles up." The dinosaur changed tack and patted its stomach before drawing a figure 8 in the air. It then gestured for Hannah to touch its 8-pack of abdominal muscles. Hannah couldn't help but laugh out loud. "I don't need to create a suit of armor. I've just had a baby." The dinosaur seemed to realize it had encountered a problem. After a brief hiatus, it suddenly started to twist rhythmically at the waist and pointed the exercise class on the flyer. Hannah was touched by the effort the dinosaur was putting in and looked at the leaflet again. "All right, I'll take it. I'll think about it." As she did so, the dinosaur suddenly reached out and helped her stand. Once they were face to face, the dinosaur spoke. "Look properly at what's in the flyer." Hannah didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she realized it was Brock again, and that she hadn't recognized him both times he had pulled that ruse. There were 2 pages in the leaflet. She opened it and found that there were 2 movie tickets inside. She smiled in surprise. "It's the Dream series that I like. I didn't even know the 3rd one had been released." Brock was still supporting her with one hand. "There are 20 minutes before the movie starts. Shall we go?" "Yes," she nodded enthusiastically. "But you can let me go now." "I thought you were tired. I was just trying to help." He passed the drink he had purchased to her and scooped her up as though she were a child. Hannah's face was hot because she noticed that a lot of people were looking at her. She had also noticed that some were secretly taking pictures with their phones. She panicked and quickly buried her face in the dinosaur outfit. She was actually a little upset. "It'll be all over social media." Brock didn't feel embarrassed at all. "Well, then I could be an internet celebrity too." "You didn't even show your face." Hannah wrapped her arms around his neck. "Should I show my face?" "No!" Her ears had turned red by that point too. Although Brock hadn't been in the entertainment section in recent times, he had been in the financial pages several times. She had heard a lot of talk in media circles about his good looks. She also knew that there was curiosity about his mysterious wife and the lack of scandal surrounding him. She was well aware that if he took off his mask, they would be the hot topic of conversation the next day. He didn't want to let her go, so she stopped resisting and let him carry her to the costume shop. Once there, he stripped off the costume and returned it. Hannah could see everyone in the store smiling at her. She was embarrassed and buried her face in his chest once again. He just turned her around in his arms and guided her toward the cinema. Their timing was just right. Hannah sat down and Brock pulled the armrest between them so that she could nestle into his arms. The music started, and then so did the movie. Brock hadn't seen the others in the series, but he made an effort to understand it because he knew that Hannah liked it. As he made sense of the story, he realized that it was quite good. The plot was about a woman who had a rare disease. She always forgot everything during the day, including who she was, but she lived many different lives in her dreams each night. They were strange and varied, and only fragments of a whole. All the fragments were finally pieced together to form a password. When she finally had that, she found the location of the password prompt. Putting them together, allowed her to pass through a forest. She arrived at a cabin where she saw a man starting a fire. He turned around and smiled at her warmly. Once it was daytime, she couldn't remember why she had pieced together those passwords, nor did she know why she had to go there. She only knew that at that moment, all the confusion in her heart had an answer. Her illness hadn't been cured, but it didn't stop her from finding and living a happy life with a man. At the end of the story, the man made a statement. "You are every line I read, every scene I see, and every dream I dream of." As they left the cinema, Hannah was still thinking about that sentence. Brock stopped outside and turned to her. "That line was from a novel called Far and Away Future. I read it when I was in middle school. It's been so many years, but it's still fresh in my memory." Brock looked deeply at Hannah, reciting the sentence from the movie as a confession of his feelings for her. Hannah's heart began beating fast, and her palms grew sweaty as she looked at the handsome man in front of her. For the first time, she took the initiative. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. He paused only briefly before he grabbed her just as strongly and deepened the kiss. It was the first time she had taken the initiative to kiss him, and it happened in a very public square. He could feel the blood surging through his body as his fingers tangled in her hair in his attempt to hold her even closer and continue to kiss. An hour later, Ashley was browsing the internet and inadvertently found a piece of news relating to her brother. She blinked and looked at the accompanying footage closely. It really was Brock. The headline read, "President of Gateway Industries, Brock Porter, seen kissing a mysterious woman on the street." One comment pointed out that he was married because he had been wearing a wedding ring on his finger in his financial report picture. And from that point, speculation began. There were many wondering if the mystery woman was his wife. It was noted that he said in an interview that he loved his wife very much. Others chimed in to say that he wasn't having an affair. The chat around the pair continued, and when they began trending in the top 20, Ashley posted the thread to their group chat with a teasing comment. However, the two people involved didn't know they were trending at all. At that moment, they were in a quiet alley in their unmanned vehicle with all its lights turned off and its doors shaking. Hannah had a moment of doubt and pushed at the man on top of her. "We're in a car." "It's not like we've never made love in a car before." Brock looked unconcerned. "It's how we conceived Wanda." She wasn't used to him being so bold and unrestrained, and she spoke hoarsely in reply. "Then hurry up." Brock's voice suddenly matched hers as he understood her meaning. "Okay, hard and fast it is." Hannah was speechless once it was over, and it was quite late when the two of them returned home. Her first move was to feed their daughter before going to bed. She was exhausted and felt that the first post-child date had been even more tiring than taking care of their daughter. And half the milk that she had wanted to give to her daughter had been wasted in her interlude with Brock. Fortunately, the little girl didn't want too much, and she was able to drink her fill. Wanda fell asleep very quickly, and Hannah breathed in that special baby scent. She was very tired and didn't look at her phone before going to bed. It was only the next day that she saw herself all over the internet and frowned in vexation. The picture that was all over the internet had been taken in bad lighting, and most of her face was blocked by Brock. Because of his tall stature and the fact that she was almost entirely encased within his arms, no one had been able to find out who she was. Everyone in the group had already made holiday plans, including Ashley and Latham, who had purchased 2 tickets to Iceland. Their eldest child, Cass, who would be starting kindergarten in September of that year, and their son would be weaned by that stage as well. Latham's leg had received further treatment, and he had finally recovered, so the two of them planned to take time together at the end of the year to see the Northern Lights. Helga saw the two of them basking in their plans and was a little envious. She messaged Steve via the group chat. "I want to go to the polar region too." Steve was in a meeting when he heard the notification. He looked at it and replied quickly, "Okay." His response made Helga happy, and she started looking up the herbs that would be growing in the harsh environment. she thought that maybe she could cultivate a new field. Everyone got busy again, and almost before they knew it, another 6 months had passed. During the winter vacation, Jacob returned from Houston and went straight to Nancy and Jonathan's villa. There, 3 children were also on a break, and when they saw Jacob, their eyes lit up and they ran over to him together. "Uncle Jacob!" Jacob stretched out his arms and picked Rebecca up first. He then looked at the 2 boys and felt a little confused about how to include them as well. "Uncle Jacob, I missed you." Rebecca's voice was clear and sweet. She kissed Jacob on the cheek because she had noticed his predicament. "You can put me on your shoulders and have 1 arm for each of my brothers." Jacob imagined that it would still involve a high level of difficulty, but he followed the wishes of the children. He put Rebecca on his shoulders and let her wrap her arms around his head. He then slowly squatted down while maintaining his balance and picked up his nephews, 1 in each hand. That was the scene that greeted Nancy when she arrived. The corner of her mouth twitched. "You're going to perform acrobatics. How clever." As she spoke, she took out her phone and took a picture of the 4 of them. When Jonathan returned later that night, Jacob went to the study with him and brought him up to speed on what was happening in the Franklin group. The 2 of them talked late into the night. A few days later, Katie's school also started their holiday. Katie and her classmates went to another newly developed artificial intelligence resort in the Davis group on the last weekend to complete the remaining work before the holidays. It was evening when they finished their work on Sunday, and the sky had already darkened. Everyone ate a sumptuous dinner in the base's canteen, and when they went outside, they found that it was snowing and probably had been for a while. The snowflakes were large and dense, so the ground was quickly covered with a thick layer of white. All the young students were very excited when they saw the snow. Some grabbed their phones to take pictures, but because it was already nighttime, the photos weren't great. Katie returned to her room and retrieved her suitcase. She had forgotten to wear gloves that day, and her slender hands felt frozen and had quickly become numb while outside. As she turned back out with her suitcase, she tried to keep her hands moving and put them in turn to her mouth to blow on them. She had stopped and was rubbing her hands again when the suitcase beside her was suddenly lifted. Katie turned and saw Emma. She hadn't seen her for several weeks. Previously, other technical engineers had been sent from the Davis group to lead the students, and Katie hadn't been expecting Emma to appear. She was wearing a black wool coat, which was much more fitted than a down jacket. She looked taller and more chic, and the gray scarf added to the overall look of a successful business person. She certainly looked as though she had matured since the last time Katie had seen her. Emma spoke with apparent ease. "I'm driving past the Davis house. I can give you a lift." "Okay, thank you." Emma nodded and didn't say anything else. They walked side by side to the car. Katie was dressed in a lot of thick layers. Her long down jacket wrapped her up like a cocoon, and she was sporting a pair of flat, bulky snow boots below. She thought she looked cute. From the corner of her eye, Emma saw that Katie's ears were red because she wasn't wearing a hat. It made her feel like she wanted to bundle her up in her arms, so she looked away. "You should be wearing your beanie. It's freezing." Katie shook her bare head. "I'm fine. I'm not cold." She was feeling the cold, but the hood on her down jacket was big and contained a large ring of fur. If she wore her hat, she wouldn't be able to see Emma in her peripheral vision. Emma stopped suddenly. She grabbed Katie's hat and put it on for her. It was instantly warmer, but her line of sight had very much lessened, and all she could see were the fluttering snowflakes right in front of her. She pursed her lips. She wanted to say something, but she decided against it and carried on quietly. Emma also said nothing, so the only sound was that of their footsteps in the snow. Katie suddenly remembered the snowy day in Boston many years before, when she had walked through the snow to be at Emma's side. She had since learned to bury those feelings. She had found self-restraint over the years and knew that she couldn't expect to get everything she wanted. The 2 of them walked to the entrance of the resort. Katie's classmates all found their rides, and Katie continued with Emma to the parking lot opposite. Once there, they found an unmanned car parked next to Emma's. It was hard to ignore. Katie was a little puzzled because there shouldn't be anyone else there. The unmanned car turned on its lights, and a young man wearing a windbreaker emerged from inside. When he saw Katie, he reached toward her. Katie was a little surprised to see who it was. "Jacob? Why are you here?" "I came to pick you up." He smiled and enveloped her in a hug. "I wanted to surprise you." Katie smiled. "You certainly did that." He grinned back. "I even brought you a gift." He then turned to Emma. "Long time no see." "Hi, are you on vacation?" Jacob nodded. "I just came back a few days ago. I heard Katie was here today, so I came to pick her up." "Looks like you don't need me to drop you off then." Emma smiled and put down Katie's luggage. "Thank you anyway, Emma," Katie said politely. "Have a good holiday." "Same to you," Emma replied as she unlocked her car. Jacob noticed Katie's red nose. "Are you cold?" He handed her the cup of hot chocolate he had just poured from a thermos. "A hot drink too?" Her eyes lit up as she took a sip. "Let's get in the car." He put Katie's luggage in the trunk. Emma started her car, and the lights created two long, white beams that pierced the night sky. In the beams of light, snowflakes danced in the air. Katie was mesmerized as she sat in the car next door, cradling her hot chocolate with both hands. Emma left first. As she watched the snowflakes bouncing off her windshield, she also thought of the day many years earlier. With her father gone and her mother full of hate and blame, she had knelt in the snow, filled with pain and regret. At that time, Katie was still very young. She had ventured to Boston by herself and had even brought her a cup of hot tea. Emma had taken it, but it hadn't been able to warm her frozen heart. It had ended up in the trash. Jacob's unmanned car approached Emma from behind and overtook it quickly before disappearing into the night. Emma was pleased for Katie that she had a boyfriend to pick her up. In the other car, Jacob handed Katie a small box. "Open it and take a look." "What is it?" Katie was curious and tried to find a way to open it, but she couldn't work it out. "A magic box." Katie's hands had warmed up thanks to the hot drink, so her fingers worked nimbly as she continued to search. She finally found the mechanism, and when she opened it, the whole box opened like a blooming flower. In the middle, a girl wearing a long dress with a pair of white wings appeared. The girl was 2 inches tall and had delicate facial features. The wings on her back were thin, and her skirt was inlaid with beautiful crystals. She was exquisite. How could someone not like this? Katie thought, and she gave him her sincere praise. "It's so beautiful." The voice that answered wasn't Jacob's. Instead, the girl standing in the middle of the flower spoke sweetly. "From now on, I'll be your little angel. You could give me a name if you like." Katie was amazed, but she managed to answer, "Let's call you Lightwings." "Thank you. I like that name. How should I address you?" "Just call me Katie." "Are you a robot?" "Yes. I was recently developed by the Franklin Group." Katie nodded. She remembered that the Davis Group and the Franklin Group had been in collaboration and that the project was close to finishing. Could this be it? She wondered. Jacob explained. The technology from the Davis Group and the design of the Franklin Group were combined, and they'll be jointly released worldwide. The Davis Group will be releasing the male model, while the Franklin Group is releasing the female model. Katie smiled. "You created our idea?" Jacob nodded. "How is it? Do you like it?" "I love it. I saw in the news that the release is still to come. So is this the first one in the world?" "Yup. But some of my college friends also help with the design concept. You might like to meet them." "Sure." Katie thought of something and blinked. Was one of those friends a girlfriend? Jacob poked Katie in the side. "You're getting into adult stuff there." "Ha, you're only 3 years older than me." She shrugged, because she knew she wasn't going to get much more out of him about that. While the two of them had been talking, they arrived at the Davis mansion. Jacob helped Katie carry her things into the house. "Contact me anytime." Okay, Katie said as she waved goodbye. She kept a tight hold on Lightwings and went in search of her mother to show the robot off. On the way back to Nancy's place, Jacob received a call. Hello? He answered. It's me, Oliver. Jacob frowned and was about to hang up when Oliver spoke again. I'm calling to talk about a joint project with the Franklin Group. Jacob sneered. There's no need. The Franklin Group and the Williams family working together? He thought. He couldn't see that in his future at all. Over the past year, Oliver had sought Jacob out many times and used many methods of persuasion to get his hands on the Jung family recipe for brain tumors. Jacob had rejected all of his approaches and had refused to engage in discussion with him. There were some things that he couldn't let go of and that he couldn't forgive. The car arrived at Nancy's villa and Jacob got out. He mentally filed away the bad mood that the phone call had put him in and pushed open the door. The house was bustling with noise and excitement. The 3 children were still awake, and when they saw Jacob, they all begged him to build a snowman with them. Jacob laughed and felt the last of his unhappiness from the phone call being swept away. The joyful feeling of the family reunion trumped anything else. Jacob didn't spend much time in New York during his vacation. There was still a lot going on with the Franklin Group, and there would be a press conference at the upcoming festival. So, he flew to Houston on New Year's Eve. Katie was also very busy during the holiday. She was going to be a sophomore soon, and she felt like she had a lot of decisions to make and things to prepare for the future. When school started back, things weren't as relaxed as they had been the year before. The seats in the classroom had been rearranged, and it was obvious to everyone that they had been arranged according to their grades. Katie found herself 3rd in the class and 5th in the grade, which she felt was a good result. She was next to the 4th in the class, who was a girl known to read books and gain knowledge all day long. During class, some of her fellow students said they planned to study abroad, although there was a consensus that they should still look at local colleges. Every student at that stage of learning had different opinions and choices to make. Katie had made her choice long ago when she was 12 years old. She still participated in the science camp every weekend. She wasn't destined to meet Emma again through the project because the person in charge had changed. She had been told that Emma and her group were no longer responsible, but also that it was a mystery that Emma had been on that trip in the first place. When Katie heard that, she couldn't help but think of that night when they had walked side by side. She wondered why Emma had been there, but couldn't find an answer. During the summer vacation, the school organized a preparation class for the college entrance exam, and Katie was busier than usual. When the new semester started in September, she received a piece of news. Many of the students who wanted to go abroad had already started to prepare various materials. Katie had always planned to study in New York, but she received a phone call that made her waver. Professor Benedict had been Nancy's teacher many years before. He had left Houston University and had gone to work for the Davis Group, where he engaged in research and development of unmanned cars. He was the oldest in Nancy's team. He had been filling his age for a couple of years and knew that his time in the laboratory was limited. He made an appointment with Nancy, who called Katie. The 3 of them went to a coffee shop near the school. Professor Benedict got straight to the point. Katie, I heard that you've always wanted to learn more about artificial intelligence. I've also noted that your performance in the Davis Group's AI camp was very good. I requested this meeting because I'm getting older and want to return home to spend time with my family. I plan to return to teaching at Houston University. I've always taught AI courses, and if you were to enroll there, I would take your classes. You could then also choose my graduate course after that. I wonder if you'd be interested in joining me. Katie knew all about Professor Benedict. She had heard from Nancy that his academic ability was exceptionally strong and that his practical skills were the best in the country. He was an upright citizen and a rare teacher. Although New York University also had an AI major, Nancy was involved with them and knew that they didn't have a professor of his caliber. Katie was very touched to be thought of. Professor Benedict, thank you. I like the idea of studying with you, but if I want to go to Houston, I need to discuss it with my mother. Professor Benedict understood. he knew that Katie had never been far away from home. Although Houston wasn't far from New York, it was still some distance. It was certainly the type of thing that would need to be talked about. "All right, I'll wait for your news," he said. "If you're willing, you could start some courses any time this semester." He had seen Katie's results, and he knew that most of the high school curriculum was going to be revised for her. It wouldn't be difficult for her to enter the course early. "Okay, thank you, Professor Benedict." Nancy was also smiling. If Katie does go, she won't have any worries. Jacob can take care of her there. They chatted for a while longer before Katie returned to her classroom. That night, she told her mother about the conversation. Her mother knew that Katie was clever and learned quickly, and that it was her daughter's dream to go into AI. But she was a little concerned about the distance. She called Jonathan, and he helped her see things clearly. So she gave Katie her blessing. "Katie, you're almost 18, so you can decide your pathway in life. Think about what you want, and then walk in that direction firmly and unwaveringly." Katie thought for a while. "I want to go to Houston University." "Okay, what do we need to do next? I'll help you plan it all tomorrow." That night, Katie sent a message to Professor Benedict saying that she wanted to go. The professor was very efficient and sent an application form to Katie the next day. Katie filled in the form and submitted all her results and past work. All she had to do then was wait for them to notify her. She went to the Davis Group Resort as usual over the weekend. She handed the project she was busy with over to her classmates and said goodbye to the other students on the team. A few days later, Houston University sent her an invitation to start her freshman year. They wanted her to report to campus as soon as possible. Katie was burning with excitement. She felt that her acceptance into the university was the reward for her hard work. It was the beginning of another stage of life. She bid a final farewell to everyone at her old school and left. Instead of going home, she went to Emma's house. She had found out by accident where she stayed. She knew there was still some time before Emma got off work, so she sat on a bench nearby and looked around. Time passed slowly. She watched all the cars coming and going until she finally saw the license plate she was after. As the car approached, Katie felt her heart thumping and her breathing became somewhat difficult. It was the second time she had taken the initiative to look for Emma. She had no reason other than to tell her that she was going to Houston for school. She was afraid that if she didn't, she wouldn't be able to see her for another year or two. She just wanted to see Emma one last time to make sure she would remember her as well. Katie jogged after the car, but she didn't wave. She was both afraid that Emma would see her and afraid that she wouldn't. When she passed by the entrance of the underground parking garage, the security door scanned the license plate and automatically opened. Instead of following Emma to her parking bay, Katie went to the elevator. She went up to Emma's and started casually pacing the hallway. She wanted to seem as though she had just happened to be in the area. Emma swayed unsteadily as she walked down the hallway toward Katie. One of Emma's neighbors tried to support her as she stumbled and bumped into the wall. The hallway was dark, and Katie noticed that Emma's cheeks were red. The pungent smell of alcohol filled the air. Katie had never seen Emma drunk, even when she had been at the Davises' mansion or parties. Emma would usually only have one drink. Katie looked at her and felt her throat tighten. "Emma?" The neighbor propped Emma against the wall and turned to Katie. "She's your friend, right? She's a bit tipsy. I saw her in the parking lot and didn't want to leave her there alone." Katie nodded at him. "Yeah, thank you." He nodded and then looked at Emma. "Okay, miss, I'm leaving you here. Take care." Emma leaned against the wall and slurred, "Thanks." The neighbor gave a half shrug and walked away, leaving Emma and Katie alone in the hallway. Neither of them spoke, and the sound of Emma's heavy breathing filled the air. The hallway was lined with automatic lights on sensors. The lights went off, and the hallway became very dark. Katie took a deep breath. "I'm going to Houston University. The light above them sensed Katie's movement and turned back on. Katie took in Emma's eyes, and her heart beat faster. "I just came to tell you that." Her palms began to sweat, and she felt nervous. She didn't have enough strength to be rejected by Emma again. Emma stared at her through bleary eyes. Their close proximity made her heart pound against her chest. She felt dizzy and closed her eyes briefly before opening them again to look at Katie. She sighed and smiled at her. Katie was pure and flawless, like an uncut diamond. Katie smoothed her hair uncomfortably. Emma's gaze unnerved her, and although she appeared calm, she felt tense and nervous. There had been many boys in high school who had declared their undying love for her, but she had always only had feelings for Emma. Although the lights in the hallway were dim, Katie felt as if she were standing under a bright spotlight, exposed and vulnerable. The atmosphere was intense, and she tingled with anticipation. Emma smiled softly. Her cheeks were rosy from the wine she had drunk, and her eyes were glossy. She looked at Katie and noticed that she seemed different. There was something about her that she had never really seen before. She felt a wave of emotions wash over her and decided she had better leave. She had said what she had gone to say. Emma would understand when she was sober again. "Goodbye, Emma." Katie turned around to leave. Emma's smile faded. "Wait, why did you come here?" Her voice sounded hoarse and tired. Katie curled her fingers into tight balls and bit her lips shyly. "I've already told you why." She turned around but didn't look at Emma. Emma stepped forward and lowered her head to lock eyes with Katie's. "Please, tell me the real reason you came here." She inched closer, casting a shadow over Katie, who instinctively stepped back. Emma reached out and grabbed her wrist. Shocked, Katie tried to pull away, causing Emma to sway before regaining her balance. Emma looked at her quizzically. "Do you still like me?" Her question took Katie by surprise. She knew she would never say something like that if she were sober. She looked up at her with large, inquiring eyes and noticed a sense of desolation and despair in Emma's expression. Emma chuckled and gave her a half-smile. "What do you like about me?" 1,000 thoughts rushed through Katie's mind, and she frowned. "Did something happen to you?" Emma's face darkened, and she released her grip around Katie's wrist. She turned around to walk away. Katie caught her by the arm and pulled her back. "Wait, you can tell me. I'll ask my uncle to help you." Upset, Emma shook herself free. "No one can help me." She tried to step past Katie and bumped into her, causing Katie to lose her footing and fall backward against the wall. Katie cried out in fright and rubbed the back of her head, holding back her tears. Emma reached out to her with a worried look in her eyes. "I'm sorry. Where does it hurt?" Katie didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head and looked into Emma's eyes. Their bodies were so close that Emma could feel the warmth of Katie's breath on her skin. She gently placed her hand on the back of Katie's head. The touch of her cold fingers made Katie want to cry. Emma saw the shimmering tears in her eyes. "Are you hurt?" Katie took a deep breath. "I'm going to Houston in a few days. I'm going to study, and I don't know when I'll be back again." She swallowed to stop herself from crying. "What happened to you? Why did you drink so much? Please, tell me what's wrong." Emma studied Katie's delicate face and began to feel dizzy again. A surge of warmth flowed through her body, replacing the coldness she had been feeling. Katie lowered her eyes. "I came to say goodbye to you. I don't know when we'll see each other again." The reality of the situation hit her hard. The thought of never seeing Emma again pained her, and she felt as if her heart would burst. The self-restraint she had held on to for so long suddenly vanished. She didn't want to say goodbye. She looked up, and warm tears rolled down her cheeks. Emma leaned closer and gently wiped the tears away. She tilted Katie's chin toward her and softly ran her fingers over her lips. Then, she lowered her head and kissed her. Their lips touched, and she felt the warmth of Katie's lips against hers. Her breathing became faster and shallower, and her body tingled. Katie felt an electric current shoot through her entire body. She began to tremble, and her knees felt weak. Afraid she might lose her balance, she pressed her body against Emma's as their lips locked. She took in the sweet scent of Emma's breath, and the world around her disappeared. A mirage of emotions washed over her. She felt joy, nervousness, and anticipation as she melted into Emma's embrace. Emma kissed her with a burning desire and passion. She put her arms around her and pulled her close, holding her as tight as if she never wanted to let go. Katie's chest heaved up and down as she gasped for air, and she felt a sense of helplessness as she groaned softly. In the dimly lit hallway, the two figures seemed to merge into one as they surrendered to their desire. They embraced for what seemed like an eternity, until Emma finally returned to her senses. She slowly pulled her lips away and pressed her forehead against Katie's. As she released from her embrace, she took Katie's hand in hers and threaded their fingers together. Katie gradually caught her breath and became aware of the desperation she had noticed in Emma. Emma looked into Katie's gentle eyes, and the realization of what had just happened dawned on her. Katie held her breath as the sensation of Emma's lips against hers lingered. Emma's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. She let go of Katie's hands and took 2 steps back. She lost her balance and stumbled into the wall. They looked at each other silently, and the motion sensor light switched off, leaving them in the darkness. Katie stood dead still. She didn't know what to say. Emma's passionate kiss had taken her by surprise. Emma leaned against the wall and drew in a long, deep breath. She ran her fingers through her hair, activating the motion sensor light. She looked at Katie and sighed, feeling as though she had lost her mind. She had longed to kiss Katie so that she would have something beautiful to remember in the last moments of her life. Being tipsy had taken away her inhibitions, and she had lost all sense of modesty. She gazed at Katie and marveled at her beauty. She looked at the girl who had blossomed into a young woman and recalled how Katie had held tightly onto her the day they had galloped across the meadow on the hunting trip. She remembered watching her with pride when she had calmly delivered her speech to her peers. She stepped forward and kissed Katie again. Katie noticed a subtle difference in the kiss. Before, it had been soft and gentle, but now it seemed urgent and desperate. Emma seemed driven by something, and Katie didn't know what it could be. She had always known Emma to be calm and collected, but suddenly sensed something different about her. It was an unsettling feeling, and she felt her body tremble. Katie knew something was wrong, but couldn't put her finger on it. Emma's kiss became more passionate, as if she were yearning for more. They stood in the dark hallway, oblivious to their surroundings. The intensity of the moment grew, and Katie started to feel uncomfortable. Emma put her hands around Katie's waist and pulled her closer. She put her hand under Katie's blouse and ran her fingers up her spine. Suddenly, Katie pulled away from Emma's lips and struggled out of her arms. She pushed her, spun around, and ran. Tears streamed down her face as she ran into the parking lot. She didn't know where she was going, but she kept running, trying to forget what had just happened. As Katie ran, she realized there was more to desire than a passionate kiss, and that Emma was drunk. She ran out of the parking lot before stopping to look back, expecting to see Emma behind her, but there was no one there. She put her hands on her hips and panted as she caught her breath. Emma was too drunk to run after her. She quickly pulled her phone out of her pocket and took a selfie. She wanted to remember the day Emma had kissed her. Her lips were slightly swollen and her cheeks were red. Her tears had made her mascara run, and she had dark smears on her moist skin. She took a deep breath and touched her lips as the feeling of Emma's kiss lingered. Katie wanted to go home. The shock of what had happened was too much for her. She ran to a cab and quickly climbed in. As the driver started the engine, Katie sent Emma a message. "You're drunk. I'm going home. We can talk tomorrow." She reread the message and scrolled through the other messages she had sent to Emma. She had secretly gotten Emma's number off Nancy's phone long ago. Because she had never asked Emma for her phone number directly, she had always assumed that Emma didn't have her number and that her messages were anonymous. She had even once sent a love poem to her. That was many years ago, and Katie had forgotten all about it. By now, she realized that Emma would know it had been her. She stared at the messages for a while, before eventually putting away her phone. Emma leaned against the cold wall in the hallway and didn't move. The motion sensor light had switched off again, and it was dark. She called out to Katie, but there was no response. She slowly slid down the wall until she landed on the cold, hard floor. She sighed and ran her fingers through her hair. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. After 3 attempts, she finally unlocked it and saw a message from Katie saying that she had gone home. She put her phone back in her pocket and pushed herself up before stumbling down the hallway to her door. She unlocked it and staggered in. She kicked off her shoes and slumped onto the couch. Suddenly, she thought of something and reached for her phone to look at it. She reread Katie's message and then looked at the name. The number had been saved as Secret Admirer. She blinked and began to scroll. Her eyes widened as she realized that Katie had sent all the love messages. It had been her all along. She felt the lump in her throat and her chest tightened. A cold breeze rushed through the open window as she reread the messages. "It was you," she whispered to herself. Emma recalled the time when she had had a rough day at work, and the situation with her father had deteriorated. She had been feeling depressed and miserable. That evening, she returned home and saw a message on her phone. It was from her secret admirer, and it was a love poem. She remembered how she had laughed at it and how it had lifted her bad mood. She hadn't minded that a stranger had messaged her because, somehow, they had made her forget about her troubles for a few short minutes. She shook her head as she realized that it was too late. She had missed her opportunity. She wished she could go back to that snowy day when she had chased Katie away. She would have done everything differently. She would have told Katie that she would wait for her until she had grown up. Emma sighed and pulled out a folded paper from her bag. It was a diagnosis report, and she read it repeatedly with a bitter smile. Tears welled in her eyes, and a drop rolled onto the report. It felt like the paper was too heavy to hold, and she let it slip from her fingers. She stared at the report on the floor and glanced at the words, Advanced Stage Colon Cancer. Although the doctor had explained everything carefully to her, she still didn't understand. She had lost her appetite and had suffered from severe cramps, but she had never expected to be diagnosed with cancer. She had just gone to the doctor for a checkup. She was young and didn't smoke or drink. She worked hard, and although she had worked irregular hours, it was never to the point where she ended up being sleep-deprived. She thought she had lived a relatively healthy lifestyle. She recalled sitting on the examination bed in the doctor's office. She had visited one of the city's best hospitals and seen a top specialist. Her entire world had collapsed when he had given her the test results. Her relationship with her mother had always been strained, to say the least. Her mother had seemed to hate her ever since her father had passed away. But her mother was gone too, and Emma thought she had walked away from a life of pain and sorrow. But it now seemed that life was cruel, and fooled her into thinking she had a bright future ahead of her. She curled into a ball and closed her eyes. Many memories flashed through her mind until she saw the image of Katie in the hallway. She had thought drinking would make her forget her troubles, and for a while it had. But then, she had become so drunk that she could barely walk. She recalled seeing Katie standing there, under the dim light, and now she had lost control of herself. She knew she had acted impulsively, but she had also been very aware of what she had been doing. Katie's was like a small glimmer of light in her heart. Her life would soon end, and she had realized her feelings too late. Katie arrived home and hurried straight to her bedroom. The memory of Emma kissing her lingered in her mind. She had to keep busy, so she started to pack for Houston. Her mother worried about her going away to university and had bought her new clothing to take with her. As usual, her mother had overestimated what she needed and had bought enough clothing for every season of the year. Katie carefully folded the clothing and placed it inside her suitcase. She then added her favorite books and a few trinkets to remind her of home. She also remembered to pack her robotics tools and other items she thought she might need. By the time she was done, she had 4 suitcases stuffed with all sorts of things. She snapped the last lock in place and decided to take a shower. As she sat in front of her dressing table mirror and dried her hair, she looked at her phone, but there was no message from Emma. She expected that Emma had fallen asleep already, considering the drunken state she had been in. Katie climbed into bed and tried to fall asleep, but her thoughts returned to Emma's kiss. The sun shone brightly, and Katie squinted in the light as she woke up the following morning. She rolled out of bed and quickly switched on her phone, impatiently waiting for it to show any message notifications. To her surprise, it beeped and indicated one unread message. She held her breath, afraid to read it. Emma had kissed her, and Katie hoped that it had meant something. At the very least, it had to mean that Emma no longer saw her as a child. She clicked on the message and eagerly began to read. Katie, I'm sorry about what happened. I shouldn't have done what I did. I was drunk and I took advantage of you. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was nothing more than a moment of weakness. I'm sorry. Katie's eyes went wide and she reread the message. Her fingers tightened around the device and she accidentally squeezed the power button. The phone prompted her to confirm that she wanted to switch it off, and she pressed the power button as hard as possible before throwing it onto her bed. Hot tears streamed down her face, and she wanted to scream. She buried her head in her pillow and sobbed. It took her a long time to calm down, but she eventually switched her phone back on and typed with trembling fingers. Okay, I won't bother you again. Then, she started to scroll through the previous messages she had sent Emma. She had sent one message after the next without a single reply, other than the one that said, Happy New Year. Katie started to cry again and read the messages one last time before she deleted the entire conversation and Emma's contact information. She tossed her phone aside and wept. Her chest tightened and her heart ached. She had first met Emma when she had just been a girl. She had waited years to grow up to be old enough for her. She scowled as she thought about how she wasted her time on a useless dream that would never come true. She tried to stop crying, but tears rolled down her cheeks as if there were no end to them. Angry and frustrated, she opened her balcony door and breathed in the fresh morning air. She looked at a small pot plant that she had been carefully growing. The plant stood tall, lush, and full of life. Katie choked in between sobs. I'll never be so stupid again. Just as she had finished speaking, Lightwings began to talk. Hello, Katie. Is something the matter? You seem upset. The little robot had analyzed her voice and had picked up on the low frequency and nasal sound. Katie glared at the robot. Yeah, I guess you could say I'm upset. A small light on the top of the robot lit up. Don't be sad. I can tell you a story to cheer you up. Katie wiped her tear-stained face and laughed. Okay, I'm listening. She listened intently as the robot recalled a fable about sorrow and joy. Katie smiled as she realized she didn't have time to dwell on her broken heart. She was going to university to follow her dream, and she had to work hard to succeed. She wanted to design intelligent robots like Lightwings and bring happiness to others who were sad or lonely. Although she had been unlucky with love, she had to accept that there would be times in her life that weren't perfect and times that were. She had to find her own happiness in life and not rely on anyone else. Katie sat down at her dressing table and combed her hair. She applied her makeup and put on some pretty earrings. Then, she went downstairs and chatted with her mother and grandmother. Jacob sent a message and told her he would pick her and her mother up at the airport in Houston and that Professor Benedict had already arrived in Houston to prepare for the semester. Katie and her mother, Astrid, accompanied by 2 bodyguards, drove to the airport the following day. The bodyguards loaded their luggage onto a trolley and followed close behind as Katie and Astrid went to the check-in counter to get their boarding passes. The airport bustled with people hurrying for their flights. A small boy picked up a receipt and handed it to a young woman standing next to him. "Miss, I think you dropped this." Emma looked down and smiled at him. "Thanks." She crumbled the receipt and threw it in a nearby trash can. She gazed across the busy airport terminal and smiled faintly when she finally saw the person she was looking for. Katie strolled toward the security checkpoint with her mother. Emma kept her distance and watched them join the express queue. She kept her eyes on Katie and her mother until they passed the security checkpoint and disappeared from her line of sight. Instead of turning around to leave, Emma gazed at the empty spot where Katie had stood. Suddenly, she saw Katie return and say something to the security officer. She seemed to have forgotten something. She looked in Emma's direction, and Emma nervously held her breath. Then, Katie turned around and walked away. Emma felt a deep sense of sadness as she took a breath. Her secret admirer was gone, and she doubted they would ever see each other again. Emma stayed at the airport for a long time before leaving. Her head ached, and she preferred not to drive. Even though she had terminal cancer, she didn't want to put the lives of others at risk. The medication had started to make her tired, so she called for a taxi. The taxi driver was a pleasant, chatty man who tried his best to converse with Emma. But when he noticed she wasn't keen on talking with him, he turned the radio up to listen to music. A sad tune played over the radio. It was a love song about heartbreak and loneliness. The singer crooned about the loss of the love in his life. "Please come back to me. My heart yearns for your soft touch. There is no light in my life without you. I have nothing without you. I thought we would be together forever, but then you went away. Maybe one day we will meet again. Please come back to me. My heart yearns for your soft touch." Throughout Emma's life, she had always loved to learn, work, and exercise, but she had never shown too much interest in music. But that day, as she sat in the taxi and listened to the sorrowful lyrics, she thought of Katie, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Emma took the taxi back to work and walked into her lab. She tried to compose herself, but it was futile. Everything that had happened in the last few days flashed through her mind. She thought about the test results, and then about Katie. She tried to focus on her work, but the words and symbols on her computer screen seemed incomprehensible. Eventually, she stood up and went to Peter's office to ask for some time off work. Peter looked at her in surprise. It was unlike Emma to request time off, but she didn't look well. "Is everything okay?" Emma shook her head. "No. I saw a doctor the other day, and he told me I was sick. I have a serious illness in my colon. I need to take time off to get better." Peter looked at Emma's pale face and bloodshot eyes. He patted her on the shoulder. "Take all the time you need. Anissa can take over for you while you're away." Emma smiled weakly. "Thanks." She found Anissa and explained to her what to do. After handing her work over, she felt mentally and physically drained. She left the office and wandered down the street instead of taking a taxi home. Emma didn't have a lot of friends. She had lost contact with most of her school friends and didn't know many other people in New York. She also didn't have many relatives either. Her late father had only 2 younger sisters. They had married locals from their small town and never left. They had both had children and had their own lives. She hadn't spoken to her aunts or cousins for several years. Her mother's brothers had moved abroad for work before Emma had been born. Her uncles had given her family some money after her grandparents had passed away, but since then, they had lost contact, and Emma had never met her cousins. She opened her phone and scrolled through the messages from Katie. She read through all the messages from beginning to end before she locked the screen and put her phone back in her handbag. She had also pushed her secret admirer away, and she felt alone. She sighed and thought to herself that it was probably a good thing. no one would mourn her when she died. Katie's plane finally landed at Houston Airport. She and her mother disembarked and waited for their luggage before finding Jacob outside. The driver loaded their luggage into the trunk and drove toward the city. Jacob had missed Katie, and he grinned happily. "Auntie Astrid, you can come and stay at my house. I've already prepared a room for you. The house is big, so there's plenty of room. I'll take Katie to her dorm tomorrow." Astrid nodded politely. "That's kind of you, Jacob. I had planned to stay at a hotel, but I don't mind canceling my reservation. Katie must settle in before I return to New York." Before they left, Jonathan had told Astrid that Katie was welcome to live at the Johnsons' residence if she didn't like staying in the university dorm. The house wasn't very far from the university. Astrid had watched Jacob grow from a pre-adolescent boy into a young man. She knew everything about him and trusted him. They arrived at the Johnsons' residence, and Jacob helped the housekeeper take Katie's luggage to her room. "I hope you like it. It's one of the nicest rooms in the house. Just shout if you need anything." Katie looked at her luggage and laughed. "I think I've brought everything except the kitchen sink." Astrid walked into the guest room and looked out the window. It suddenly occurred to her that Jacob and Katie were close in age. There were only a few years between them. Although he considered Jonathan and Nancy his family, and even though the Davis family had cared for him after the tragic passing of his parents and sister, in reality, they weren't blood relatives. Jacob and Katie had similar upbringings and came from the same social class. He had grown up to be a decent young man with good morals and ambition. She hoped he and Katie would fall in love. They would make a great couple. The Davis family had pampered and spoiled Katie since she had been born. She was kind and had a pure heart. Astrid didn't feel comfortable with her marrying a stranger. Jacob was well suited to her. Katie was now old enough to go to university and fall in love. Astrid soon became lost in her thoughts as she imagined Katie and Jacob falling in love and getting married. She didn't hear Katie walk up behind her. "Mom, what are you thinking about? You didn't hear me calling just now." Astrid looked at her daughter. "I was just wondering, have you met someone you like?" Katie was stunned. Her mother had never asked her such a direct question before. "Why do you ask?" She thought about Emma and felt a lump in her throat. She shook her head. "No, I haven't. Besides, everyone has told me not to fall in love too early. I'm planning on graduating from university first." Astrid smiled. "Who knows? You might even meet someone while you're studying. It's okay, my sweetheart. I won't pressure you. Finish your studies first if you feel that way." Katie grinned. "Thanks, Mom." Astrid didn't say anything further. She went to Katie's room to help her unpack. Jacob helped Katie contact the university to arrange her registration for the following day and sort out her dorm room. He also invited her and Astrid to have dinner with him that evening. Astrid liked Jacob's proactive attitude and polite manners. She had already taken on the role of a mother-in-law, and the more she looked at him, the more she wanted him to marry her daughter. After dinner, Astrid excused herself and went to bed. She tossed and turned and found it difficult to fall asleep. Katie woke up the following day excited to start university. Although she had missed 2 weeks of classes, the semester had just begun, and it would be easy for her to catch up. She collected her textbooks and other learning materials and checked out her dorm room. The next day was Saturday, so she had 2 days free to explore the campus and get used to her new surroundings. Astrid's flight back to New York was that afternoon, and Katie insisted on taking her to the airport, but Astrid refused. Katie eventually gave up and gave her mother a long hug before she left the Johnson house. That evening, Katie returned to her dorm room and met her 3 roommates. She spent the whole of Saturday in her room reading through the classwork that she had missed out on. Then, on Sunday, she met with Professor Benedict to work through her course plan and plot her specialized lessons with him. Katie had always dreamed of studying artificial intelligence and robotics at university. She walked around the campus and smiled from ear to ear with happiness. Her dream had come true, and she was ready to start her life. Although she had always thought she would enroll at New York University, She felt glad that life had taken an unexpected turn. She looked forward to the exciting things she would learn in a new city. In the afternoon, Jacob called her and invited her to join him and a few of his friends at a popular hangout that happened to be in the building next door to the Franklin Group's head office. He smiled when he saw her and quickly introduced her to everyone. "These are my friends from university. I think you'll like them." A handsome young man sat next to the window with a glass of red wine in his hand. He waved at her and gave her a friendly smile. He came across as refined and collected. Jacob gestured to him. "That's Zane. He's a bit older than me and is studying finance." Katie smiled politely. "It's nice to meet you, Zane." A young man with chiseled features and a distinguished look about him sat opposite Zane. He smiled broadly when he saw Katie. "Hi, I'm Matteo." Jacob grinned. "Matteo and I are the same age. He's studying business management." Jacob then introduced Katie to a young woman who was sitting in the corner. "Meet Charlotte. She's about 2 years older than you. She's studying industrial design and is in her second year this year." Charlotte smiled pleasantly at Katie and gestured for Katie to sit beside her when Jacob suddenly remembered something. "Oh, I almost forgot. Charlotte helped me to design Light Wings." Katie sat down next to her. "Wow, thanks, Charlotte. Lightwing is an amazing robot." The two young women instantly connected and began chatting about various things. Jacob sat beside Matteo and Zane and talked about a project they were working on. He had roped them into collaborating with him, and apart from a few technical issues, the project had been going well. Katie soon discovered that university was a new world, completely different from high school. She was no longer a teenager. She was on the cusp of becoming an adult and couldn't wait for what university life had to offer. She smiled happily as she pondered the future. She looked forward to meeting new people, learning new things, and the challenges that would come with it all. The group of friends chatted excitedly about their project, and it didn't take long for them to ask Katie to join them. They needed help in researching and developing their new technology. Katie was thrilled. Although she still had much to learn, she knew she was in good hands. She was a fast learner and even better at applying her knowledge. The emotional turmoil of her encounter with Emma soon became a thing of the past, and she was too busy to think about it. During the day, Kitty attended classes and studied in the library. She went to the Franklin Group whenever she had a free moment and immersed herself in developing their technology. The Franklin Group had been working on a new smartwatch and was ready to launch it to the public. Katie had bought herself a smart suit for the occasion and arrived at the launch wearing it with low-heeled shoes. She met with Charlotte, who introduced her to an interested client. Katie smiled politely and handed a questionnaire to the client. The client spoke about improvements and gave positive feedback. A camera crew followed them around and focused on Katie as she did a product demonstration. Katie felt like she was finally growing up. She experienced something new and thrilling every day. Some days were good, while others had their challenges. Emma had taken her leave from work to travel. She packed a light backpack and headed to the mountains, where there wasn't any phone signal or crowds of people. As she passed towns along her way, she saw billboards advertising new products that the Franklin Group had launched into the market. Emma was staying in a hotel in a small town. It was old, and the room was small and simple. It was nothing like the rooms in the fancy city hotels, but it was good enough for her. One evening, she saw an ad on TV. Much to her surprise, she recognized Katie in the ad. She was wearing a suit and was demonstrating how the product worked. The cameraman zoomed in on her beautiful face much longer than anyone else's in the shot. Emma gazed at Katie on the TV screen, and an overwhelming sense of loss surged in her heart. She choked up and began to cry. Her father's health had never been good, so Emma had become responsible for caring for him over the years. She had worked hard while she had still been in school. She had wanted to go to university to study and get a decent job that would pay enough so that her father wouldn't have to work. At that time, everyone had thought she was rebellious, but the truth was that Emma had been more disciplined than anyone else. She hadn't smoked, drunk, or hung out at parties. She had also never wanted to fall in love. Her father's health had started to deteriorate after she had graduated. Her family had wanted her to marry Maya, and although she had initially resisted, she had eventually agreed for her father's sake. But then, her father had passed away before he could have the life-saving kidney transplant. Her mother had disowned her, and Emma had buried herself in her work. But it was Katie's presence that had changed something in Emma. She hadn't paid much attention to Katie until that one night in Boston when her father had passed away. Katie had traveled by herself across the country to find her. The young teenager had declared her love for her, and although Emma had chased her away, she had finally noticed her, and she had quietly watched the gangly teenager blossom into a beautiful young lady. She had vowed never to fall in love, but it seemed that the seeds of love for Katie had been planted many years ago and had just needed time to grow. Katie was the first girl she had had true feelings for, but ultimately, Emma regretted falling in love. She took Katie's pearl earring out of her pocket and rolled it between her fingers, gazing at it with a deep longing. The small earring slipped out of her fingers and landed on the carpet. Emma quickly bent down to pick it up, but the earring had rolled under the bed. She lay on the floor and stretched her arm out to reach it, and after much effort, she finally got a hold of it. She felt as if she found something she had lost. As she pushed herself off the floor, she bumped her head against the corner of the bedside table. Her vision flickered for a moment. She felt a stabbing headache spread across her forehead. Emma grimaced and touched the bump, only to discover it had started to bleed. She didn't care, though. Instead, she carefully wiped the dust and dirt off the earring and slipped it back into her pocket. A cheerful tune played on the TV, and Emma glanced up to see an ad for something. The woman on the screen looked vaguely familiar. She tried to remember who the woman was and realized it was Lexi. Emma had seen her a few times at company functions. Lexi was a well-known model and endorsed the Davis Group's unmanned cars. Emma had never interacted with Lexi because the marketing department had always managed her relationship with the Davis Group. She was beautiful, with delicate features and a perfect figure. It seemed she had ventured into the entertainment industry. Emma sighed sadly. Everyone appeared to be having a good life except for her. In Havana, Zoe walked with Layla and Bruno on either side of her. They passed by an enormous billboard advertising a car produced by the Smoko Corporation. Dressed in a body-fitting cocktail dress and stiletto heels, Lexi beamed a bright smile. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders. She was the picture of perfection. Layla tugged at her mother's arm and pointed to the model on the billboard. "Look, Mommy, she's so beautiful." Zoe smiled. "Yeah, she's a celebrity in America. I liked her a lot when I was still in school." Layla giggled. "I also want to be a beautiful celebrity like her." Bruno glared at her and smirked, but didn't say anything. Zoe chuckled. "It isn't always fun being a celebrity. You don't have any privacy and have to work hard to stay popular. I'd much rather you focus on studying so that you'll have a more stable job one day." She pulled the two children from the billboard and continued walking along the sidewalk. It had been 6 years since she had walked the streets of Havana. Many things had changed, and places she once knew no longer existed, which made her feel uneasy. Zoe felt confident that no one would recognize her. She had matured in the last 6 years, and time had taken its toll on her. She was also sure that Oliver wouldn't be able to find her. She had changed her name to Joanne, and she didn't expect him to remember what she had looked like. Her university friend had given her regular updates on her mother's condition, and although she had said her mother was doing okay, Zoe had been very relieved to see it with her own eyes. Zoe, Layla, and Bruno stopped at the intersection in front of Zoe's former home. She was holding the children's hands, and her own had gotten sweaty. "I want to go over and take a look. You two follow me, but don't talk." Layla nodded seriously, but Bruno made no response. He didn't like to talk. Sometimes he wouldn't even manage 20 words a day. Zoe's mother, Jasmine, had opened a grocery store before she had been paralyzed. When her husband had heard what the reparative surgery would cost, he had run away. Zoe had sold the things in the store to pay for the first round of fees for her mother, and after that, she had gone out to work. The money she had earned had only been enough to sustain the household and had barely made a dent in her mother's surgical fees. The doctor had said that if they didn't operate, her mother would face lifetime paralysis. That was why she had gritted her teeth and agreed to Oliver's surrogate contract. She sighed as she thought of the past. The grocery store had reopened, and that's where Zoe led the children. She was mentally preparing for what was to come when she heard the conversation coming from inside. "That's all you sold this month? That's pathetic." Zoe was stunned because it was Benjamin, her father, who had spoken. "Is he back?" she wondered. She stood in the doorway and listened. Her mother replied quickly, "Business has been bad recently. It's not like you don't know. It's such a small amount of money. It's not even enough to pay for school fees." Benjamin cursed quietly. "Didn't Zoe sell herself as a surrogate? Where's the money she made?" Zoe held her breath, and a chill slowly made its way up her body. She couldn't believe that her dad would speak about her in that way. She wanted to cover Bruno's ears, but he had heard every word. He looked up at her, but his eyes weren't mocking her as they usually did. Instead, he almost looked empathetic. She wasn't sure if he understood, but she pushed aside the thoughts of the children and continued to listen. Jasmine stood up for her daughter. "Selling your body in that way is a one-time deal. You know that. And it only gave us enough for the surgery. It's all gone. If it wasn't, why would I open the store again? You might be deliberately withholding it because I had a child with another woman. She's dead. So no one's going to fight you for the boy if you want to raise him as your own. He won't put us to shame like the girl did. We can hold our heads high in a family again." "Who was his mother? Why can't her family take care of him? The little boy will know I'm not his mother." "It doesn't matter. His mother died when he was 2, and then I took care of him by myself for 2 years. A 4-year-old child will see whoever treats him well as his mother." Jasmine was silent for a moment before she nodded. "You're right. Zoe's been unreliable. I would have had another child if I'd been able to get pregnant again after having her. I would have liked to have had a son. I'll see if I can find the man who hired her as a surrogate, and I'll ask him for money, but I can't guarantee that I'll get it." Benjamin immediately cheered up at the prospect of getting more money. "Yes, tell him that our daughter gave up a lot for him, and that we deserve to be well looked after because of the sacrifices she made for him." "All right, I know what to say. But you need to agree in advance that your son will be mine from now on. I have to know that I can count on him in the future." Benjamin nodded. "Of course." At the door, Zoe was trembling all over. Her throat seemed to be blocked, and she couldn't make any sound. She would never have expected that the reunion she had pictured for years would be like that. Her father had often complained that there were no boys at home when she was young, but she hadn't dwelled on it too much. Her only thoughts had been to study hard and find a good job to secure her future. She had thought that if she had earned enough money, she could show her parents that females were worthy too. But the truth that had been revealed was horrifying. She had always been a pawn in a game to be disposed of at any time. She thought about the sacrifice she had made for her family and all that she had been through over the past 5 years. Tears started to fall, and she stood frozen. Her father finally noticed them in the doorway. "What do you want to buy? Best prices and best products in town. Come in and take a look." Zoe was standing in a shadow, and it was obvious that he hadn't seen her clearly. He had only really noticed the children in their bright clothes. She knew that she should leave, but at that moment, she couldn't move at all. She felt like she was under her father's spell. It was as though she was being drawn back into a very dark place, step by step. Bruno, who had been silent for the entire conversation, decided it was time to speak. "This shop doesn't have ice cream. Let's go somewhere else to find it." He then pulled Zoe's hand and dragged her away. The young boy was quite strong, and he got her to follow him relatively easily. Layla didn't understand what was going on, but she instinctively knew that Bruno was right, so she also pulled her mom away. Zoe was led away from the store, and only once she was several feet away did she realize she had been holding her breath. She slowly recovered her senses, and the three of them walked around the corner until the shop had disappeared from sight. Zoe suddenly felt that she couldn't walk anymore. She squatted on the ground and buried her face in her knees. Layla was a little scared by that point and wanted to cry. She looked at Bruno for reassurance. Bruno frowned as he took a tissue from his pocket and put it in Zoe's hand. The two children didn't say anything and quietly waited for her to finish crying. When Zoe felt calmer, she asked the question that had formed in her mind through the tears. "Do you guys miss Grandma?" Layla nodded. Bruno didn't respond, but his eyes lit up. When Zoe had first started working for the Torres family 6 months earlier, she had invited Josephine to the city to celebrate the New Year. Bruno had met her then, and they had gotten along well. He had even called her his grandma at one point. "Why don't we go for a drive and see her today?" Zoe asked. The two children nodded, so Zoe guided them toward a store advertising car rental. It wasn't like her to be so extravagant, but she booked a car to go to the village. As they got into the car, Zoe turned to Bruno. "Do you miss your mom?" "No." Despite his words, Zoe could feel his disappointment. In 2 years, Isabel had called her 10 times in total. She had asked about Bruno 3 times, but she hadn't seen him much. Zoe's heart ached for the boy beside her. She was an adult and found it difficult to bear. She knew that he must be feeling a lot of hurt. Josephine was very surprised when Zoe arrived on her doorstep with the 2 children in tow. It was the first time she had taken Bruno to the small fishing village. Zoe usually picked Josephine up and took her to the city instead. Layla had almost forgotten the village, but there were some things that she had remembered. She took on the role of a tour guide as she pulled Bruno around. She was delighted to be the one in the know for once. It was Bruno's first time there. He took in the muddy road, the simple houses, and the casually dressed locals. It all felt strange to him, but he accepted it easily enough. He saw a few children playing cards together. The cards were worn out and well loved. He listened in as a child showed a toy card to his friend. He was telling them that he had gotten it through his dad's work. Bruno noticed the child's eyes light up when he mentioned his father. He looked down and moved away from the other children. Layla quickly caught up with him. "Wait for me. Don't you want to play with them?" "No." He headed toward the river. The river was fast-flowing, and 2 small figures sat side by side without saying anything. Eventually, Layla grabbed a stone and tugged on Bruno's shirt. "Do you know how to throw stones so that they splash on the water?" Bruno didn't answer, but he had a go. "It's not like that. It has to be thrown diagonally like this." Layla swung her arm back and forth as she spoke. Bruno had never done it before, and Layla's movements weren't quite right. Neither of them could get the stones to skim, so they just ended up throwing stones into the water. A teenager walked by. He picked up a small, flat stone from the ground and threw it over the water with great force. It jumped 4 times over the surface of the water before sinking. Layla's eyes lit up. "Like that, Bruno!" Bruno didn't say anything. He just picked up more stones and began to throw them like the other boy had done. When the teenage boy saw Bruno trying, he whistled to get his attention and threw another handful of stones before he left. Layla was a little disappointed in her efforts. She found it so hard, and she didn't think just seeing him do it a few times was enough to learn from. Bruno tried again, though, and the stones jumped twice on the surface of the water before disappearing. Layla cheered. "That was awesome! You did it!" Bruno cast a sidelong and somewhat condescending glance at her. But when he turned back to the river, his lips curved slightly upward. That was how they spent the afternoon. Layla looked for suitable stones, and Bruno was in charge of throwing them. Every time he got it right, Layla would cheer. Her happy laughter was often heard, but but Bruno still didn't make a sound. He was silent until twilight fell, and they had to return to the house. Josephine's house had smaller beds and thinner mattresses than Bruno was used to, and he wasn't accustomed to sharing a bed. There were only 2 rooms. Zoe and Josephine were in one, and Bruno and Layla shared the bed in the other. Layla fell asleep as she was talking to him excitedly about going back to the river the next day. She was small, but the bed wasn't big, so her leg ended up over his when she rolled over. Bruno frowned and pushed it away, but he heard her mumbling in her sleep as he did so. He found it annoying that someone could be so noisy even while sleeping, and he turned his back to her. When Zoe heard no more movement in the room, she quietly covered the 2 children with a blanket. Bruno wasn't asleep, but he didn't move and just lay quietly, listening to an insect outside. He didn't know how he fell asleep, but when he woke up the next morning, Layla was lying there looking at him, as if she were afraid of waking him. As he opened his eyes, she smiled, but Bruno ignored her and got up. He went to the bathroom to wash his face. Before Zoe, he had had another nanny. That nanny had been very strict, and he had been physically punished if he had done something that she deemed to be wrong. At one point, his hands had been swollen, and he had had several marks on his legs. When his mother had been home, he had told her how the nanny had punished him, but she hadn't listened. She had just handed him some money and told him in an emotionless voice to buy himself some sweets. When he had taken the money, he had deliberately used his swollen hand, but his mother hadn't seen it. He had given up on her after that. He had then made a plan to drive the nanny away. He had deliberately put all the money his mother had given him into his wallet, and then left his wallet on the coffee table. His next step had been to turn on his mother's computer to secretly record whatever was going to happen. As he expected, the nanny took his money. When he had asked about it, she had fetched a basin of water and placed it on the coffee table. She then had pulled his head down and pressed it hard into the water. He had been scarred for his life. He had struggled with all his might, and she had eventually stopped, as if afraid that something would happen. He had come up choking and spluttering. "Everything in the house is mine," she had said. "What's wrong with me taking your money, you bastard? Your mother doesn't want it, and your father doesn't know anything. If it wasn't for me, you would have starved to death long ago." The next day, at his kindergarten, he secretly used his teacher's phone and made a call to the police. When he handed over the video, the nanny had been furious and had tried to hit him. He had silently watched the nanny go crazy and get taken away by the police. Soon after that, his mother invited Zoe into their lives, and he finally had the quiet life he craved. He had also searched online to find out what bastard meant. He could hear Zoe and Josephine making breakfast. One was making porridge, and the other was making bacon and eggs. When Bruno appeared in the kitchen, Zoe put down what she was working on so that she could help him. The house was old, and the hot water system was inconsistent. She poured hot water from the kettle into a basin for him. He washed his face, and then walked to the front door and looked into the distance. The sun had risen on the horizon. He heard another child being called by his parents for breakfast. He saw the child running back, laughing, seemingly without a care in the world, even though he was barefoot and didn't appear to have much. Bruno looked down at the expensive shoes he was wearing. They were stained with mud, but they still looked flashy. He had a sudden thought that while he never lacked money to spend, he never felt as happy and loved as the other children seemed to be. Zoe and the children stayed in the village until Sunday afternoon and then returned to the city. Before she left, she stuffed a lot of money into Josephine's pocket. She had originally planned to give it to her biological parents, but had changed her mind after the conversation she had overheard. Josephine initially refused to accept it, and it was only when Zoe broke down and confided what had happened that she took it. Zoe got into the car and drove away. She saw Josephine's house getting smaller and smaller in her rearview mirror before it finally disappeared. She believed in karma and hoped that her kindness would come back to her in some way. Bruno and Layla went back to school, primary school for Bruno and kindergarten for Layla. The children were growing every day, and with the children at school, Zoe was able to turn on her computer and start her work. She had taken on many odd jobs over the previous 2 years and had a good network going. She didn't find it that difficult to find work, and her current project was as a software engineer, as part of a team that had been put together for a large company. After logging in, her colleague, Jaden, greeted her in their chat room. "Hi, you weren't here on the weekend." "Yeah, I was away, but don't worry, I'll catch up with the progress today." "I'm not worried. Did you go on a date?" "No, I just went back to my hometown." Zoe didn't like to talk too much with people on the internet, although she had known Jaden for a couple of years. "Okay. Does that mean I'm getting more of that dried fish? When will you send it to me? I'll buy it at market price." When they had first started working together, Zoe had sent him some of Josephine's delicacy. "No need to buy it. I was given a lot, so I'll send some to you soon. Your mother makes delicious food. According to the rules of genetics, you must be just as fabulous by virtue." Zoe replied with a laughing emoji and then wrote, "Sorry to disappoint you, but she's not my birth mom. Anyway, I have to get back to work." The chat stopped, and they carried on methodically with their project. Zoe and Jaden were working for the Williams Family Corporation, and Stuart was in charge of their project. He had enough understanding of the situation to know when things needed to be signed, so he took some documents to Oliver's office. Oliver had gotten used to the continual darkness of his world, and he had gradually mastered the art of writing while blind. After quickly signing his name, he took another call before putting down his phone and rubbing his aching temples. "I've arranged for a comprehensive examination for you tomorrow," Stuart said. Oliver nodded to indicate that he had heard, and Stuart left. Oliver suddenly felt nauseous, and he moved as quickly as he could to the connected bathroom. His head was spinning. The queasy feeling eventually passed, and he leaned against the wall tiredly for a while before returning to work. As soon as he sat back down, his phone rang. He fumbled for it, picked it up, and answered. Once the call was over, he contacted Stuart right away. "Could you arrange for me to fly to New York tomorrow afternoon?" Stuart was a little surprised. "Okay, and you're going to New York City because you want to?" "I'm going to see Jonathan. Bring me the latest information about the HQ project that's under development." Stuart instantly understood. "Okay." The next day, Oliver went to the hospital. When the doctor saw the report, he sighed. "The radiation is working too slowly, and there are currently no better methods available here. However, we heard that a team overseas is currently conducting research in the area, but they haven't entered the clinical testing stage yet, and I don't know how long it'll take, but I've been told about another 3 to 5 years. Oliver got right to the point. "With my condition, how quickly am I going to get worse?" "I estimate that within a year, there might be a mild memory loss. Within 5 years, the current understanding is that you could experience a phenomenon similar to Alzheimer's. At that time, you can also expect corresponding losses in hearing, balance, language, and so on. If it's serious, it could change your personality considerably." Oliver listened silently. Once the doctor had finished, he turned to Stuart. "Let's eat, and then we fly out." Later that same afternoon, Jonathan and Steve were having a meeting at the company offices. When the meeting finished, one of the assistants approached. "Mr. Davis, there's a gentleman downstairs looking for you. He said he's the president of the North Ocean Group." The assistant then handed over a business card. "He said that you'll see him when you see this." Jonathan nodded. "Invite him to the reception room. I'll meet him there." The assistant nodded and left. "What's Oliver doing here?" Steve asked. "I think he's dying." Jonathan gave a slight smile. "Are you interested in joining us?" Steve nodded. They went to Jonathan's office first to conclude their chat about the situation in Mexico, and then they went to meet their guest. Oliver had Stuart with him. When he heard them coming, Stuart stood up to greet them. Oliver also stood up. He knew that Jonathan would know about his lack of vision, so he didn't try to hide it. He stretched his hand into the void. Jonathan reached out and shook it politely. Steve didn't follow, and he instead pulled out a chair and then sat down. Oliver withdrew his hand and also found a chair. Then he handed Jonathan a document. Our HQ research and development project has made a breakthrough. Here's the technical information. Jonathan took it and gave it a cursory glance. Just as he had expected, the Williams family had been researching a special computer chip. That was their strong point. Every company had its specialization, and there was nothing strange about the fact that North Ocean Group's computer chip technology was stronger than theirs. Jonathan set the document down. I see. That's not a bad result. Congratulations. Oliver's hands clenched slightly, and he explained the reason for his visit. I hope to work together with the Davis Group. He had never gone to Jonathan before because he couldn't bring himself to ask the man for anything. But he was out of options and wanted Jung's prescription. Things had changed. As Jacob had said, if he died, it would be beneficial to the Davidson and Sloan families. He knew that Jonathan was a business person and would need to see strong benefits to be tempted into anything. Tell me what you want out of the negotiation. Jonathan responded calmly. Oliver cleared his throat. The economic benefits brought by this research could be divided into a 28 split. The Williams family would get 20% and the Davis Group 80%. But in addition, I want the prescription from the Jung family for brain tumors. Jonathan said nothing in response to Oliver's offer, and the office fell into silence. Oliver didn't know whether Jonathan would accept or not, but he did know that he would give anything to get that medicine. Jonathan's fingers tapped lightly on the table, and he smiled ruefully. I think it would be better if we didn't go into business together. Oliver raised his eyebrows at Jonathan. Although he couldn't see, he knew where Jonathan was based on where he had heard his voice coming from. If I keep things as they are, I can get several times that profit in less than 5 years. Jonathan's words carried a deeper meaning. What does that tell you? Oliver had suspected that result, but faced with losing all his faculties in the years to come, he knew that he had to keep trying. Even if he used the time he had left to teach his son everything he knew, he could never expect someone so young to go up against Jonathan. With the Williams family out of the way, Jonathan would be looking to obtain more than just the proceeds of one project. Oliver felt humiliated to be asking Jonathan for help, but he had no choice. He badly wanted to have another 15 healthy years ahead of him. He hoped to guide Reggie until he was at least 20 years old, so that he could help him set up for the future. He knew that he had to keep going. I can further your economic gain, he said. His mortification was increasing with every word he spoke. His pride wouldn't let him tell Esther about his illness, although he knew she could have helped plead his case, and she and Jonathan were close. He was also aware that she knew Jacob and was a link to the Johnson family, but he knew that Jacob was determined to keep him out in the cold. He suspected that even if Esther spoke up, it would be in vain. He also knew that Jonathan had saved Jacob and that the younger man looked up to him. That was his main reason for being where he was. Jacob had always listened to what Jonathan had advised. Sorry, but I have to go. Jonathan's tone was filled with regret. I believe you're sincere about cooperating with me, but I can't do it. He then stood up and spoke to Steve. I have a client I want to meet with. You can stay with Mr. Williams to talk further if you like. I'll come back later. As soon as Jonathan was out of the room, he opened the new message he had seen on his phone. He went into his office and called the person who had messaged him. Is this news confirmed? Yes, came the reply. My brother is at an overseas research institute. He said that it's only a matter of months before a new tumor treatment method will be released, and that it will be very effective, a medical revolution. Make sure this information isn't leaked to anyone. And thank you. The news has come at just the right time. I'll treat you to a meal sometime. I owe you." He disconnected the call, returned to his office, and asked Jack to bring him the results of the investigation into the Williams family portfolio. After careful analysis and another cup of coffee, he returned to the reception room to find Steve and Oliver sitting silently. Oliver had tried to talk to Steve, but he had soon discovered that he had been naive in thinking the younger man would be the easier target. Steve wasn't as scheming as Jonathan, but he had mastered the art of speaking only when necessary. He had only said 3 words to Oliver in the time they had been together in that room. Oliver actually felt relieved when he heard Jonathan come in. Jonathan sat down and spoke in a light and breezy voice. "Steve, how was your conversation with Mr. Williams?" "I don't believe he's sincere. I think we should see him out." The corner of Oliver's mouth twitched when he heard such a long sentence come from the man who had said nothing for so long. "I know it wasn't easy to make the trip here," Jonathan said, "especially not being able to see. I'm sure it's often quite inconvenient to go out. Unfortunately, I have a dinner tonight, so I won't be able to entertain you. But I do have a club with lots on offer, if you get my drift." Stewart was furious about his boss being summarily dismissed, but Oliver wasn't angry. He was pondering his next move. He had expected a negative response and understood why they hadn't agreed. He also knew that Jonathan didn't intend to take things any further, at least with what Oliver had put on the table. Oliver didn't move. He felt like he was slowly being torn apart. "We are all straightforward people, and I don't want to waste time. How would you see it working?" Jonathan thought for a while before answering. "I've calculated the distribution of the Williams family investments over the past few years, including everything in Cuba. I don't have many requirements, but I would want to pull all your technology companies under the Davis Group's name and have the exclusive rights to all the related research and development technologies." Oliver was shocked when he heard that. Beside him, Stewart jumped as if in physical pain. The office was silent and everything seemed frozen in time. Steve gave one of his rare speeches. "If the negotiation is successful, I'd like to be in charge of this. When my son grows up, I'll transfer the technology companies to him." Oliver was speechless. He realized that Steve was more capable than he had given him credit for. He was meticulous in his calculations, he spoke well, and he was clearly looking to the future. Jonathan responded with a smile. "Wesley is still young. We have to let him grow up first." Stewart felt that the 2 men were going too far. Oliver hadn't yet agreed, but they were talking about the business as if it were their own. Once the technology company was split up, 1/3 of the Williams family fortune would be gone. The recent research and development projects were also at a critical stage. If all of them were successful, the economic benefits created would be far greater than the family's real estate interests. It would be a big chunk of the family's income. Oliver knew that if he didn't agree, the future was very bleak indeed, and he felt desolate. He had gone to Jonathan because he had no further options. If he didn't agree, the Williams family would be devoured by Jonathan in a matter of years anyway. And then Reggie would have nothing. If he agreed, his child would retain at least half of his assets. His hands clenched into fists under the table, and he put everything he had into keeping himself calm. "All right, it's a deal." Both parties set to work on drawing up the contracts, and Stewart immediately requested the relevant information to be sent from Cuba. The next Monday, both parties finally finalized all the documents, and they made it official under the watchful eye of an international notary. After everything was settled, Jonathan gave the secret Jung family prescription to Oliver. Oliver felt as though he was drowning in emotions, both happy and sad. He had always wanted his family to prosper, and he was pleased that there would be something for his son, but he was deeply disappointed to have lost so much of their fortune. The Davis Group took over all the technology subsidiaries previously controlled by the Williams family, which included all the shares, technologies, and investments. News of such a big deal spread very quickly. While the world talked about them, Jonathan and Steve returned to the family home to escort Carol to the cemetery. It was the anniversary of Jonathan's father's death, so everyone in the Davis family attended, including Nancy and Helga, who had married into it. The cemetery was on the outskirts of New York City, and when they arrived, they made their way to the graveside together. It wasn't the first time that the triplets had been there, but at 5 years of age, they had more understanding about how to behave than they had previously had. They were all quiet as they made their way along the immaculately landscaped road together. Jonathan supported his mother as they walked at the front of the group. Carol had been through a lot in recent times, but she felt a real sense of calm as she looked at her husband's headstone. She put down the flowers she had been carrying and looked around at the generations that were gathered. "Roy, I've come to see you." She had been the main family support for many years. Her son worked hard, and her grandson cared deeply about her, but no one could replace her husband. She filled them in on the latest family news. "Steve's had a son called Wesley. He's chubby and adorable. Katie's gone to Houston University to study. She was only a junior in high school, but she received a special invitation. She has a very promising future. Tristan, Callum, and Rebecca are also smart and sensible. In another year, they'll be in primary school." Carol was still talking when Cynthia spotted the picture on Steve's father's grave and called out, "Grandfather!" Carol broke off her monologue. She looked at her great-grandchild and then at her son. She held his gaze quietly for a while. "Jonathan, I heard that you and Steve took over the Williams' technologies." He nodded. "Yes, Mom. Everything's been completed." Carol nodded, but her eyes fell on the graves of her 3 deceased sons. "You let them off easy." Sophia had been listening, and she turned to Jonathan angrily. "Mom's right." She had seen how the death of her 3 brothers had aged her mother. It had been a very painful period of time, and it had all happened because of Arthur and the Williams family. Sophia had also had to say goodbye to her husband not long after she had given birth to Steve. She had been a widow for many years, watching on as other couples traveled the world while she carried on alone. "Mom, Grandma, it's all in the past," Steve said. "Let's not talk about unhappy things anymore." Carol took a deep breath, and tears rolled down her face. She grabbed Jonathan's hand. "It's been hard on you all these years, I know. If your brothers were all here, they would be very happy to see us gathered today." Jonathan hugged his mother. "I don't believe wealth and status are as important as family and happiness. I would give everything we have in exchange for their return." Steve clutched Helga's hand tightly because he agreed wholeheartedly with that sentiment. If his father hadn't died, he wouldn't have envied others so much when he was young for having one. He wouldn't have found his mother secretly wiping tears away in her room during the many lonely nights. If money could be exchanged for everything, he wouldn't hesitate to bring back his deceased family members. Wealth could be regenerated, but those that were dead could never come back. Helga gave his hand a squeeze in response. "I'll always be with you." Her voice hadn't been loud, but Cynthia had heard it. The little girl immediately ran over, threw herself at her dad's feet, and then hugged his leg. "Dad, there's still me and my brother." Steve smiled and reached out to stroke his daughter's hair. The graves of Roy and his 3 sons were cleaned up, and the headstones filled with fresh flowers. When everyone left, Jonathan helped his mother back into the car. "I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll see you back at the house later." Carol nodded. "Okay, take care of yourself." After everyone left, Jonathan made a phone call. Soon, a car appeared around the bend and stopped. Latham, Ashley, and their 2 children got out of the car. There were only a handful of people who knew that Ashley was Jonathan's biological half-sister, and Carol wasn't one of them. They were afraid that she wouldn't be able to bear the blow. Therefore, every time the anniversary of Roy's death came around, Jonathan would meet Ashley there separately. Although Ashley hadn't really known him, it was a link that was difficult to ignore, especially when she had heard from her mother, Elena, that her year with Roy had been the happiest time of her life. Ashley and Latham put down the flowers they had brought and stood bowed together over the grave. Cassandra sized things up curiously and was somewhat surprised to see the photo on the grave.
Grandfather is so young.
Their youngest wasn't speaking yet, so he just looked on curiously from his position in Latham's arms.
Dad, look,
Jonathan said quietly.
Ashley's also living a happy life with her family. You've got more grandchildren.
As though he agreed with Jonathan's words, baby Jason snorted and giggled. After leaving the cemetery, Jonathan went back to the company to handle a few work matters. In the lobby, he happened to meet Emma. She had been waiting for the employee elevator, but Jonathan invited her into a private one with him. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes.
Have you been busy lately?
Emma shook her head.
No, I'm just not sleeping well at the moment.
He patted her shoulder. It wasn't long before they reached Emma's floor, and Jonathan nodded his farewell as she left. She had applied for 2 weeks' leave, but it was time for her to get back to work. She turned on the computer and refamiliarized herself with the codes and parameters. It felt like a lifetime had passed. She stayed busy, and as she was just about done for the day, she received a call from an unknown number.
Is this Emma?
A female voice asked.
Yes, who's this?
I'm Dr. Channing, from the Department of Gastroenterology at the hospital. Is it correct that you recently came to us for a gastroscopy?
Yes.
Emma held the phone tightly. What's the matter? Can I trouble you to come to the hospital again? We have some information we'd like to pass on in person. Emma had a terrible premonition, but she managed to reply calmly.
Okay.
Emma went straight to the hospital's gastroenterology department after work. Dr. Canning was at his office with a young female patient and 2 other doctors when she arrived. She was about to go in when she heard them arguing. The oldest doctor was scolding Dr. Channing and the other physician.
How could you make such a stupid mistake?
You misdiagnosed the patient, which delayed her treatment. I'm afraid the hospital must take legal action. Bewildered, Emma knocked on the door and entered the office. Dr. Channing turned red with embarrassment when he saw her.
Miss Penn, I'm glad you could come.
Is something the matter?
Take a look at this.
Are these the examination results you were given a few weeks ago? She quickly scanned the document.
Yes, it is.
He looked at her apologetically.
I'm very sorry.
The hospital mixed you up with this young woman here, whose name is also Emma Penn and is the same age as you. We gave you the wrong diagnosis. We take full responsibility. Emma was so stunned by the news that she couldn't speak. The department director cleared his throat. You don't have colon cancer. You have a mild case of gastritis. These are your results. He handed her a piece of paper. She glanced at the diagnosis and she sighed with relief. She read the doctor's recommendations at the bottom, which included avoiding spicy foods, alcohol, and certain medications. The other woman was sobbing uncontrollably. I can't believe this. I thought I had gastritis when I actually have cancer. I could have started my treatment weeks ago. Thank goodness I went to see another doctor for a second opinion. Dr. Channing nodded sympathetically. Emma looked at him. Do you realize how upset I was? I thought I was going to die. This is inexcusable. As I said, we take full responsibility for the error. We're very sorry. But Emma was in no mood for his apologies. She turned around and promptly left, slamming the door behind her. She took the stairs all the way down from the 8th floor, and she rushed out of the building. When she was outside, she filled her lungs with fresh air. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She finally burst into tears. Emotions ranging from surprise and relief to remorse and anger surged through her. She took out her phone and booked a plane ticket to Houston for that weekend. She wanted to let Katie know that what she had told her a few weeks ago about the kiss meaning nothing was untrue. She fervently hoped she would understand and forgive her. She also wanted to tell her how she felt about her. After receiving her booking confirmation, Emma felt excited and happy. She couldn't wait to see Katie. She skipped down the street as if she didn't have a care in the world. An enormous burden had been lifted from her shoulders. When she returned to her apartment, she looked at the results of her examinations once more to make sure she wasn't imagining things. She then typed a text message, but hesitated before sending it to Katie. "I'll be in Houston this weekend. I want to tell you something in person." She finally sent it and waited for a few minutes, but there was no reply. She checked the time. It was 9 in the evening, so she figured Katie must be studying. She took a shower and then checked her phone again. Still no reply. Emma frowned. She wasn't used to waiting for someone to respond, and time seemed to be passing very slowly. She sat on the couch and waited until 10:30. She checked her social media handles, and then she decided to call Katie. She received an automated message telling her that the number was not in service. She tried again, but she got the same message. Emma felt uneasy, wondering whether Katie had changed her number. She was in Houston after all, so she thought perhaps she had gotten a local number. She finally gave up, deciding it would be better to speak to Katie in person. She switched off the lamp in the living room and went to bed. She was so excited, however, that she spent half the night tossing and turning. It was almost 3 o'clock by the time she fell asleep. She dreamed of Katie in front of the hospital building in Boston, smiling warmly at her as she handed her a hot cup of tea. She then woke up with a start and remembered walking back to the house from the hospital as Katie followed her through the snow-covered streets. That morning, when she went to work, she bumped into Jonathan at the elevator again. He raised his eyebrows when he saw that she still had dark circles under her eyes. "Another wild night out?" She laughed awkwardly. "No, as a matter of fact, I'm still a virgin." He was speechless, and it was only then that she realized how stupid she must have sounded. The elevator arrived, and she rushed in without saying goodbye. She then smacked her forehead and turned red with embarrassment. How could I have said something so dumb? What is he going to think? She convinced herself that it wasn't a big deal, and that Jonathan would never pass on the information to anyone. The next few days passed quickly at work, and it was finally the weekend. Emma woke up early on Saturday morning, packed a small duffel bag, and took a cab to the airport. When she arrived in Houston, she stopped by a flower shop to buy a bouquet of roses for Katie. She then headed to Houston University. Though she didn't know where to find her, she was sure someone in her dorm could help. Katie had spent the past week studying and helping Jacob out with the Franklin Group's project, so she was exhausted. After getting a few hours of sleep on Friday night, she woke up Saturday morning and had breakfast with some fellow students. Jacob was busy with some student union activities, but he called her later and invited her to an event they were organizing. She knew all of his student council friends, and they greeted her warmly when she arrived. They were laughing and joking around when her phone rang. It was her dorm supervisor. "Katie, your sister's here. She wants to see you." Katie was puzzled. "My sister?" "Yes, she's just arrived. She's in the lounge area. What should I tell her?" Although Katie had no idea who the woman was referring to, she was curious. "Can you ask her to meet me at the Student Union building?" Katie wondered who could be pretending to be her sister. If someone she knew from New York were visiting her, they would have contacted her directly instead of going to her dorm supervisor and impersonating a member of her family. She hadn't told anyone at Houston University that she was a Davis. She was popular enough without having to resort to her family's status and wealth. Several students had already sent her love messages or had asked her out in person. The dorm supervisor had told Emma that Katie was at the student union building for an event, so she walked across campus. She had made a special effort to look her best that day, and with the bouquet of roses in her hand, she attracted quite a bit of attention from passerby. Her earlier excitement had turned to nervousness, and she wondered how Katie would react when she saw her. She had never actively pursued anyone before, and she was unsure of what to say. Though she had seen Katie just 2 weeks earlier, it felt like a lifetime ago to Emma. She entered the student union building, looked around, and saw 2 familiar figures at the end of the corridor. She stopped in her tracks, and her breath caught in her throat. Katie was facing Jacob, who suddenly lowered his head and lifted her chin with his hand. Emma couldn't see clearly, but he looked as if he was about to kiss her. Katie had her back to her, so she couldn't see her expression from where she was standing. Other students passed by the couple, blocking Emma's view. She gripped the bouquet so hard that a thorn pierced her finger, but she was so preoccupied that she barely noticed. She had imagined her reunion with Katie several times during the past week, but not once had it involved seeing her with another person. She had been so sure Katie had feelings for her that evening when she had been waiting for her outside her apartment. Why else would she have come to say goodbye to me before coming to Houston? She wondered. I didn't think that she and Jacob were really going out. Emma had been hoping to surprise her and tell her that everything had all been one big misunderstanding, and that she loved her. She had hoped that Katie would admit she felt the same way, and they could finally be together. She looked down at her hand, noticing the drops of blood on her finger for the first time. Jacob and Katie were still standing close together, oblivious to everyone around them. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat, turned around, and left the building. She walked back across campus in a daze, feeling heartbroken and empty. Inside the building, Jacob finished examining Katie's eye. It's red, but I don't see anything. Are you sure there's something there? She nodded. Maybe it's an eyelash. My eye feels so itchy and irritated. Could it be infected? She shrugged. Who knows? It was fine just a moment ago. She looked around for the person who was pretending to be her sister, but she only saw a group of students standing near the entrance to the building. What happened to the beautiful girl with the roses? She was here a minute ago, a girl said. She looked very disappointed. Maybe someone broke her heart. A guy added, Too bad she's left. I would have loved to comfort her. Katie's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. She wondered whether they were talking about her mysterious visitor. Jacob grabbed her arm. Come on, let's go back to the party. Emma walked back to Katie's dormitory and left the bouquet of roses just outside the entrance. She was still stunned by what she had seen. Never in a million years would she have imagined Katie with a boyfriend, but she and Jacob seemed well suited. She wondered whether she had misunderstood Katie's intentions when she had showed up at her apartment that night. Maybe she just came over to say goodbye, she thought. I was the one who kissed her. I didn't even give her a chance to say anything. Her finger was still bleeding. As she reached into her pocket to take out a tissue, she touched the pearl earring she had planned to return to Katie. She felt like bursting into tears. She walked across the lawn and sat under a tree. She wrapped her bleeding finger in a tissue, and then she carefully wiped the bloodstains off the earring. Emma sat there for a long time, gazing into the distance in a trance. She had no idea how much time had passed before she saw Katie walking toward the dorm. She was accompanied by a female student, and they were chatting and laughing. When they reached the entrance, they noticed the bouquet of flowers by the door. Katie's friend was surprised. Why would someone leave this here? Look how beautiful the roses are. Why do you suppose they are 18? Katie glanced over and shrugged. Maybe the intended recipient just turned 18? I feel sorry for the person who left it here. Someone must have broken their heart. Poor thing. Her friend burst out laughing. Look who's talking. You've only been here a few weeks, but you've already left a trail of broken hearts behind. How many people have you rejected? Katie winked at her. Don't look at me. I had nothing to do with this one. Come on, let's go pick out something to wear for the Franklin Group's party tomorrow. They went into the building where the dorm supervisor stopped Katie. Did your sister find you? Katie smiled.
No, and I don't have a sister. I have no idea who it could have been.
The woman was puzzled.
Come to think of it, I did find it a bit strange that a sibling would show up with a bouquet of roses.
Katie stopped in her tracks.
She had the roses? What did she look like?
She was very pretty. I'd say she was in her late 20s, brown hair. I haven't seen her around campus, so I don't think she's a student here. It didn't occur to Katie that it had been Emma, so she shrugged. She left the flowers outside by the entrance. You can keep them if you want. After that, she and her friend went upstairs to their rooms. Emma was still sitting outside on the lawn when she saw the dorm supervisor appear and pick the flowers up. She had never felt so disappointed in her life. Emma sat on the grass in front of Katie's dorm until late evening, and then she spent the night at a hotel nearby. The next morning, she hung around campus, hoping to bump into Katie. She finally gave up and took a cab to the airport. She arrived in New York late in the afternoon, and she went downtown to her favorite cafe to meet Attila and Athena, two friends from college who had also studied robotics and engineering. They had both participated in the university's robot competition with Maria and Emma years ago. Attila had gone to work for a software company after graduating, and Athena had just finished her doctorate. The three drank coffee and chatted about work for a while before Emma broached the subject she wanted to discuss with them.
Do you remember our plans to start a gaming company when we were in college? I'm thinking of doing it.
Her two friends were surprised.
I thought you were happy working for the Davis Group,
Athena said. Emma nodded.
I am, but I want to do something for myself.
She had made up her mind to establish a startup company. She wanted to do what Jacob was doing. She had found out that he not only owned shares in the Franklin Group, but was also active in the company's operations. The executives trusted him, and they were gradually transferring power over to him. Maria had told her that there were many issues to sort out, and the company's finances were a mess. Though Jacob was young, he had extraordinary talent, and he was good at solving problems. Emma figured that if he could run a company, so could she. She had gotten excellent grades at school, she had a good degree, and she was working hard at the Davis Group. She was dedicated and smart, and was a strong leader. She knew she couldn't take over an existing company like Jacob had done, and that she would have to start from scratch. But she was sure that with hard work and the right talent, she could do it. She didn't care about becoming rich like Jonathan and Maria. She just wanted to do something she was passionate about and could be proud of. Attila looked at her intently.
Are you serious about starting your own company?
She nodded.
I know a lot about the gaming industry. I was part of several projects at Brightstar.
I worked with the research and development team to design Creation, which was a huge success. The shares I have in the company have skyrocketed over the years, so I have money to invest. But I need talented partners.
You've come a long way. You must be so proud of your accomplishments.
I also invested in Brightstar, and it's paid off. I never expected Creation to be such a big hit.
Do you remember our team in the robot competition at college?
Athena asked.
Who would have thought Maria would end up marrying Jonathan Davis and become so successful?
She's now running Brightstar and is a senior executive at the Davis Group.
Emma nodded.
There's no reason why we can't be as successful if we put our minds to it. Attila was thoughtful. I guess we need to come up with a solid strategy. We were still kids in college, and we knew nothing about running a business when we talked about starting our own company. He turned to Athena. What do you think? Are you in? I suppose I can invest some of the money I've saved. I was planning on buying a house, but it can wait. Attila laughed. Ever since I've known you, you've been saving up for something. You're all talk and no action. Well, I'm also willing to invest. We could split the shares according to how much each one of us has invested. Athena nodded.
Deal. I have a few $100,000.
Me too. I would have more if I didn't spend so much on women. Emma burst out laughing. You're incorrigible. But seriously, let's come up with a business plan first and see how much capital we need. I also have a few $100,000 in savings. Attila was surprised. Really? I thought you bought a house in the Upper East Side. You must be filthy rich." "Not filthy rich, just well off. I have a decent salary at the Davis Group, and after Creation took off, we all received huge bonuses, not to mention my shares in the company. I'm still paying off my mortgage, though." The three friends became increasingly excited as they discussed the specifics of their new startup and their goals. They were young, ambitious, and full of dreams. Later that evening, they went to Emma's house to draw up their plan. Attila and Athena were impressed by the modern and spacious two-bedroom property. Emma had decorated herself, and she had turned one of the bedrooms into a study. They had takeout for dinner, and they talked until well past midnight. Emma convinced her friends to spend the night since it was so late. Attila slept on the couch, while Emma and Athena slept on the double bed in her room. Emma lay awake for a long time, staring at the window at the full moon in the sky. She was thinking about the time she and Katie had walked together at the Davis Group retreat. She wondered what Katie and Jacob were doing, and whether they were sharing a bed. The next few weeks flew by. Athena and Attila went to Emma's house every weekend to finalize their plans for their startup and discuss finances. They split the tasks into 3 and set deadlines. They took turns handling the necessary paperwork and speaking to lawyers and consultants. Emma worked extra hard at the Davis Group so she could leave early or arrive late when she had errands to run for her new business. She was so excited about their new company that she forgot about anything else. She felt as if she had a new lease on life, and it was exhilarating. She woke up at 7 every morning and didn't stop to rest until 10 in the evening. For once in her life, she was happy that she wasn't married like most of her colleagues at the office. She was free to do as she pleased, and she knew that if she had a family, she would never have the time to pursue her dreams. She sometimes thought about Katie, especially when she saw the pearl earring she kept in her wallet. She also checked her social media handles occasionally to see what Maria and the rest of the group were up to. But she rarely attended the gatherings anymore because she was too busy. 2 months passed, and Emma, Attila, and Athena finally completed all the paperwork to launch their startup. They were ready to enter the next phase. It wasn't until Dorian and Rose sent her an invitation to their wedding in January that Emma suddenly realized it was already the end of the year. She sent them a message confirming her attendance. Rose was so excited that she replied right away, asking her to be a bridesmaid. After that, Dorian sent her a message urging her to hurry up and get married, since she was one of the few single people left in the group. Though Emma knew he was only joking, she felt a pang of regret and loneliness. He was right. Everyone around her seemed to be settling down and building families, while she wasn't even dating anyone. Before she knew it, it was Christmas. On the last day of the year, she went to Boston to visit her parents' graves, and she returned to New York the following afternoon. She had planned on staying at home, but Attila convinced her to go out and celebrate the start of the new year in style. "Come on, Emma. You're in your late 20s. You're too young to be sitting around at home in your pajamas." She finally agreed to meet her later that evening. She had no idea that Katie was also in town. Katie was relieved when the holidays had finally arrived. It had been a busy few months with all her college courses and her part-time job at the Franklin Group. She had worked with the design and research team non-stop right up to Christmas, so she was happy to be flying back to New York to see her family. She spent Christmas at home with her parents and New Year's Eve at the Davis Villa. The following day, Jonathan, Nancy, and the triplets left for Havana, and Katie met up with some former high school classmates who had invited her to a trendy new bistro in Manhattan. She found it strange to be among her high school friends again. The students at Houston University seemed so much more mature to her, even though they were only a couple of years older. Her friends told her about their plans for the future. Some had already been accepted at universities and were starting in the fall, while others boasted about wanting to take a year off after graduation to travel. They were all curious about campus life and bombarded Katie with questions. They talked and laughed for hours, and then a few of the girls suggested they do a bit of window shopping on Fifth Avenue. They walked along the busy street, which still had a festive atmosphere. Katie was used to doing all her clothes shopping online, so it was a treat to look at all the fancy dresses on display in shop windows. They had just passed a store when, suddenly, she saw Emma sitting by the window of a cafe. She stopped in her tracks, and at that very moment, her phone rang. Distracted, she took it out of her bag and answered the call. When Emma noticed her standing on the street, her heart skipped a beat. She thought Katie looked stunning in her white coat, black pencil skirt, and knee-high brown leather boots. She was the most attractive woman among her group of friends. Emma peered closely at her face and saw that she was wearing a pair of diamond earrings shaped like water droplets. They suited her delicate ears and complexion. She wasn't sure Katie had seen her, but when she looked at her direction, she quickly looked away. She glanced at Katie again for a moment, and she noticed that she was on the phone with someone. She was smiling and laughing, and Emma became jealous all of a sudden, wondering whether she was talking to Jacob. Katie looked so beautiful standing there that several people on the street turned their heads to look at her as they passed by. After a while, she and her friends walked away, and she gradually disappeared from Emma's line of sight. Emma craned her neck to catch one last glimpse, but Attila interrupted her. "Hey, Emma, what's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost." She stared at him with a dazed expression. "What?" He burst out laughing. "Did you even hear a word I said? What do you think of my idea? It may be challenging to implement, but we can talk about it." "I'm sorry, I wasn't listening." Attila looked out the window. "Did someone catch your eye? I don't see anyone attractive out there." Emma waved her hand dismissively. "Never mind, it's not important. When was the last time you went on a date? I can introduce you to some hot chicks if you want. And don't forget your high school reunion this spring. I remember quite a few girls had a crush on you back then. Maybe some of them are still single." She shook her head. "No, thanks. I'm not interested. Can we change the subject? Tell me about your idea again." Jacob was in Havana at the beginning of the new year. The Franklin Group had some business with a supplier there, so Jonathan had invited him to join the family. He and Jonathan had just finished a meeting and were about to drive back to the Davidson villa when they saw an infomercial on a large LED screen outside a medical clinic. The ad was in Spanish but had English subtitles, so they stopped to watch it. It featured a prominent doctor in Germany who had just developed a wonder drug to treat high-risk tumors that couldn't be removed with surgery. The infomercial included information about the drug's ingredients, the treatment plan, and several medical terms that Jacob and Jonathan didn't understand. The doctor discussed the large amount of clinical data he had gathered over the years as proof of the treatment's success. At the end of the ad, the breakthrough drug would be available to patients with tumors in the following days. Jonathan smiled. He had successfully tricked Oliver. Helga had told him that it would take her at least 6 months to develop the Jung formula for his tumor. But the new miracle drug from Germany was now readily available. He was just about to say something to Jacob when he suddenly noticed Oliver and Stuart standing behind them, watching the infomercial in astonishment. Oliver saw him too, and he walked over. He stopped a few feet away, eyeing Jonathan and Jacob angrily. He clenched his fists and nodded toward the screen. "Did you know about this?" Jonathan raised his eyebrows. "Yes, I did. I see you've regained your vision. Congratulations." Stuart glared at him. "You kept this information from Oliver on purpose, didn't you? You knew this miracle drug was in development, and yet you cheated Oliver out of his company's shares in exchange for the Jung treatment." Jonathan just shrugged. "So what if I did?" Oliver shook his head. "Man, you're nastier than I thought. You're out to destroy me, aren't you?" Jacob took a step forward and confronted him. "What did you expect after what you did to him and his family? And mine?" He knew Oliver had returned to Houston after the last time he had seen him at the cemetery. Jacob had visited his parents just after Christmas, and he had found a fresh bouquet of chrysanthemums on their gravestones. Oliver didn't say anything. He was furious with Jonathan, but equally angry with himself for letting himself be tricked. All his efforts to get his hands on the Jung medication had been for nothing. Stuart shook his finger at Jacob. Don't pretend to be so innocent. You also had a hand in this. He stood in front of Oliver to protect him, but Jacob pushed him away, and he grabbed Oliver by the collar. He was shaking with rage. You conniving, evil dirtbag. You almost robbed me of my rightful shares in the Franklin Group. Are you satisfied? Is that what you wanted? I'd give you the whole company if I could only get my family back. My sister suffered 3 years of torture because of your father.